Right. So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this live session on Revenue Rewired, how services reshape revenue, margin, and growth. This is a topic that is no longer a theoretical concept. It is something that we're seeing play out across industries, from manufacturing through infrastructure, construction, food, defense, and beyond. And what we're observing is a fundamental shift in how organizations actually create and capture value. And revenue is moving beyond the point of sales. Margins are increasingly linked to the performance and outcomes, and growth are being driven through deeper and longer term relationship with customers. And this is exactly the topic of our webinar today. If I can move the slide. Yes. So my name is Ali Bigdeli. I'm a professor of industrial service innovation at the Advanced Services Group at Aston University in the UK. My work really focuses on how organizations shift their business models to create and capture value through services, particularly how they move from a product-centric business model into a outcome-based, service-led business models. I'm delighted to be joined by two outstanding speakers who bring real lived experience of this transformation. I'm joined by Chris Borrell, who is the Vice President of Services at Thales Land and Air Systems, bringing hands-on experience of leading service transformation in complex technology-driven environments. I'm also joined by Paolo Dassi, who's a Senior Vice President of Strategy and Business Processor at Konecranes, and he will provide us with some strategic perspective on scaling service-led growth at Konecranes, and he will share with us his experience. So a little bit of the agenda. After this welcome, I'll talk to you a little bit about the commercial evidence and industrial reality. Then I'll hand over to Chris and Paolo, who will share with us their experience with services in their respective organizations. We will have plenty of time for Q&A at the end, so please make sure that you use the chat to send us your questions, and we'll try to go through them. And then we'll have the closing remarks at the end. Just before we start with the webinar, I just want to tell you a little bit about ourselves, the Advanced Services Group. We are a research-led, industry-focused boutique consultancy. We've been working with over 450 organizations, and both in terms of the larger multinationals, but also different sectors on their aspiration to develop new service-led business models and actually adopt the new business models. One of the key area of our activities is around executive-led partnerships. We've been working and supporting leadership teams across these organizations to develop these new business models, but also adopt such business models in their organizations. And a core members of our groups that are leading researchers in this space. So we do research with real world impacts. We develop tools, techniques, and frameworks that companies and leaders can apply in their aspiration to move from a product-centric business to a product and service-centric, and ultimately to an outcome-based focused business in their respective organizations. So there is a QR code in the top right corner, and you can scan it. It will take you through our website with full details about who we are, what we do, and a little bit of the details around that. Probably most of you on the call are familiar with the concept of servitization, but I thought it would be a good idea if I tell you a little bit of the basics. When we talk about services and industrial services in particular, we're talking about three distinct types of services. In the first level, which is referred to as base services, there are those services that are really focusing on the provision of the products. So it's like a spare parts, maintenance, and those types of services. The next level are intermediate services, which the focus is around the condition of the product and how the product's been used in the customer's operations. And ultimately, the goal is these advanced services, which is really focusing on the capability enabled by the use of the product in the customer's operations. So there's a range of these three types of services supporting products into supporting the customers. If you wanted to unpack these three types of services, we've developed what we refer to as services staircase, which demonstrates the details of each of these three types of services. As I said, at the bottom of the staircase, we've got the product and product spare. So the companies are supplying the product, supplying the spare part of the products. Ultimately, they move into intermediate services, which is around restoring the condition of the product or guaranteeing in restoring the condition of the products, or performance advisory type services, which is around putting sensors around the machines, around the products, capturing the data, and provide advice back to the customers as to how they can use products better in their operation and more efficient. And ultimately, these are the advanced services in the top level side of the staircase, which are about guaranteeing the outcomes from the products and so on and so forth. The move from those base into the advanced services are what we refer to as servitization. And across these, we're talking about the increasing an absorption of the risk and by the provider. And then on the other side, when you go up, it's about increasing the support for the customers that they're getting from the providers. So this shift is referring to as servitization. One of the key questions that usually we have is around the why question, which is around the incentives for servitization. And in our latest book called Servitization Strategy, we have defined four key areas or four key incentive areas on why companies actually should embrace or should move towards servitization. And they've been categorized into the performance arguments, growth arguments, resilience arguments, and sustainability arguments. For the sake of today's conversation and today's webinar, I'm just going to focus on the performance arguments, which is around revenue, profit, and productivity. So what we have seen in the work with the businesses and in the research that we've been carrying on, it is clear that those companies that are getting engaged with servitization, they are, by offering these types of services, the total value of revenue earned will increase quite substantially and significantly for a period of time, or for a period of time that they're engaged in the development of these services. Similarly, there's a profit argument, which is got a bit of lag sometimes, which I can explain to you a little bit later. But the whole idea is, as firms progressively adopt servitization and expand their services portfolio, the total value of profit earned by firms also increases. Probably not as linear as the revenue, but also increases substantially. And ultimately, it's about productivity and productivity increase for both the providers and the customers, because they are more able to be more efficient in the use of the products in their operations, and therefore the overall productivity will increase. One of the key areas of our work was to establish evidence. So we knew these things are happening. We knew that revenue is increasing, profit is also increasing, productivity is going up, but we needed to have hardcore evidence to support these arguments. And therefore, at the end of last year, we concluded a large program funded by the government to exactly understand how servitization impacts productivity and environmental sustainability. As part of this project, we conducted a large national survey of 700 firms in the UK, mostly industrial firms, with a footprint on services to understand this relationship between servitization and revenue and profit. Out of those 700, we got engaged and deep dive into around 380 of those businesses, which we went through 16 years of financial and performance data to better understand, by growing the services portfolio, what was the implication on the revenue and profits. And ultimately, we validated the data in 6 regional events, and with engagement with around 70 of those firms that we got engaged in the first place, to understand, to better share the data, better understand if the insight are correct, are meaningful, and the representation of the data are actually meaningful for the industry. And the results were actually confirming our hypothesis, our understanding, and it was pretty interesting on a couple of different occasions and a couple of different strands, but I'll share 3 of the key findings on that sense. One was about the revenue increase. So we observed, for every 1% point increase in reported service revenue, on average, there is a corresponding 2.3% increase in total revenue earned. So if companies are able to increase 1%, increase 1% of their shares of the services, overall, they can increase 2.3% in their total revenue earned from product and services. Ultimately, there is an argument about the profit growth, which is around 1.85%. Again, for every 1% point increase in reported services revenue share, on average, there is an increase of 1.85% increase in the total profit delivered by the business. And ultimately, because our focus was around these outcome-based services, the impact of these have been quite huge in the studied companies. Again, for 1% unit increase in the income more from advanced services, on the top right corner, or top of the staircase, on average, we've seen a corresponding 7.8% increase in total profit delivered. So we were aware of some of these impacts for sure, but we needed to quantify them. We needed to demonstrate, and we needed to demonstrate the opportunity of servitization. And of course, the challenge is to achieve these things in firms with a strong heritage of products and productions. And the 2 speakers today will tell us a little bit more about how they've gone about the journey, and how they've achieved some of these numbers based on their practice. The final bit from me that I wanted to share with you, I wanted to just briefly bring together in terms of what actually drives this shift in practice. And again, as I said, Chris and Paolo will talk to us about the specific cases. So at the core, there are, amongst other things, there are two things to focus on. There's a lever of the value, and there's an enabler of success. On the lever side, the first point, this is fundamentally about how value is created and captured. This is more about understanding of the business model side. So we clearly see a clear model shift, moving away from one-off product sales towards recurring service-based and increasing outcome-linked revenue. And that change is not just a cash flow conversation, or helping business with cash flow, but more about the entire commercial logic of the business is also shifted. The second one is about value is no longer embedded in product itself, but it's the whole idea of the performance of the products in use. So profit comes from improving performance and delivering outcomes, not just simply selling additional services on top, like spare parts, etc. It's about the performance. But having the right model and having the right business model is not just enough. There is and this is where the enablers come in, and this is the organizational side. The leadership and organizations alignment are obviously critical. So without a clear strategic intent, or a strong cross-functional coordinations and management and leadership buy-in, these business models wouldn't go anywhere, or at least we don't see any scale on that sense. And equally important, this is how organizations engage with their customers and their install base. There's a need for sustained life cycle interaction with the customers. that enables businesses to capture a lot of data from their machines, from their assets, to be able to provide some of those outcome-based services to their customers. So the shift in services is not just a commercial change or it's a change in the business model, but also it's an organizational and relational transformation to with the customers. So these are what we've seen, and what we are now going to do. We're going to do a very short poll to understand where your business and where your work is before I hand over to our speakers. And the poll is this: we want to understand where is your organization today in service maturity. You can think about portfolio of services, or you can think about the revenue or profit that you're making from services. Is it 20%? Is it between 20 to 40%? Or 40% above, or mostly from advanced services? And ultimately, the letter E is about you're still at the exploring stage. So I think you've got the poll is now open that you can answer. We can't vote, but hopefully let's give it a couple of seconds and we'll see the results. So I'll ask my colleague Christina if the results are in. Can we see them, or are they still coming in?
Still coming in. Still coming in. We're at 60%. Okay, last chance to give your answer, and we'll close the poll.
Okay. Okay, that is interesting. So I would say the majority of the responses, over 50%, are up to 20% of services, or between 20 to 40%. There are some companies in the room that have got 40% plus, but mainly in the basic and intermediate services, and around two of the businesses in the room, there are very much in the advanced space, and about 20% of you are exploring, but not the scale stage. So it's a good good kind of like a mix of businesses that we've got in the room. So without any further ado, I hand over to one of our colleagues, I would say, because Chris Bottle is now an honorary professor at the Advanced Services Group as well. But Chris, over to you, and would be delighted to hear your story.
Thank you, Ali. Interesting results from the survey, probably what you'd expect to see. So I think the challenge for us is we're somewhere, our services are somewhere on that scale between 0 and 100% of our business. And I think you're on this webcast because you're looking at how you can push your services up as a higher percentage to take those benefits that Ali's explained. And I think what's interesting for me in Thales, which is a company in many different markets, is that I sit over the top of 5 different business lines that have very different product sets, with very different markets and very different customers. I have 14 different service businesses in 6 countries. And I think if we'd have taken that poll amongst those, we would have had at least one of those entities in every single box. So it's the sort of range of services that we've developed in Thales. We go from very low to very high. It can depend much on the product and on the customer maturity, but certainly we have companies that are strongly service driven, and others that are developing their services. And given the incontrovertible evidence that services are good, we would think it would be easy then to encourage our colleagues outside of the services community to help us grow services. But the reality is that it's often very challenging, that sometimes there's a little growth spurt and then there's a stall. Sometimes the services go back. It's why I see services as something of a spiral. And how do you, what do you have to do to climb that spiral? And what do you have to do to prevent yourself sliding back down again and reducing the level of services in your industry? So there are three options. Services can stay at the level it's at and be a sort of mechanical level of services business within a company. It can certainly go down if it's not given focus and resources. But the real challenge is how to make it go up. If you could just advance the slide, please, Ali. So from my experience over the last 20 or more years, there are many enablers to help you grow services and a number of blockers. But I think three things that are always present when we've grown our services business. The first is leadership intent. So being able to get the senior leadership of the business engaged in the idea that growing services is important, that it requires focus, that it requires direction, that it requires their time and effort, and where we've seen that happen, we've seen growth occur. Equally, understanding your customer, and I know Paolo will talk about this later. But do you really understand what your customer needs, their pains, what their problems are, how they even support the equipment that they've purchased from you? Because if you really don't understand your customer, it's very difficult to grow a service offer with that customer. Equally, if your customer is not willing to change the type of services they acquire, it can take time to convince them to spend time understanding why they think that, helping them to understand why there may be benefit for them in changing the support model they have with you. But I think the other factor that's been a real success is creating what I call a community of the willing. So finding people in the organization, and that can be at any level in the organization, that understand and support the idea that we can grow services. And then working with them to influence other people, because the idea is to try and reach a tipping point within the management that, yes, this requires our effort, focus, and if you get that, and if you get all three of these things happening, they kind of act as a multiplier and they accelerate the speed at which you can grow services. So for me, those have been three key enablers for the services growth we've achieved. On the other side, there are obviously breaks, blockers, things that you have to be aware of and you have to work to overcome. The most obvious in manufacturing companies is that manufacturing companies have become who they are based on their product culture. Very proud of and very concentrated on their products and the developing of the next generation of products. And sometimes we've seen, certainly in my company, where in order to be heard in services, you have to make your services sound like a product. A service level agreement, capability offer, an availability offer. Because if you don't speak the same language as the rest of the organization, they sometimes don't quite understand. It's a bit of a dangerous game. I prefer to servitize our products rather than productize our services. But at the early stages, if it helps you get the message across, and it helps to break that product culture and bring it to services, it can be useful. The other thing is inertia. Companies have enormous inertia on the way they've always operated, and what you're trying to do is change that, change the mix, change the way the companies think about the mix between services and products, and that's a culture change that can and does take time, and it requires constant attention and constant repetition of the messaging. So despite the strong financial incentives, and we've seen those in Thales, particularly with advanced services, we still need to build this leadership support, this understanding of the customer and communities of the willing. Perhaps if we go to the last build, Ali, thank you. And what we've also seen, and I think it's borne out by the survey as well, is that there's not just a financial upside to services growth. There's a real benefit for the rest of the organization. We've seen difficult customer engagements where the support that they have has not been at the level they expected, largely because the type of support they're buying was very transactional, and they were in a very fast-moving environment, and it didn't suit their operation. So we've seen that acting as a blocker to additional sales of the next generation of product, or even additional product of the same product. So getting our service offer right is key, and we've seen that getting it right does actually improve the level of sales of our products. So it has this sort of double impact effect. Increased profitability, I think absolutely that's a huge advantage for a company that needs to recycle revenue to invest in product. You know, I like to tell my colleagues that services is the lungs of the business, that they're the brains in terms of how they develop the new products, but we're the lungs. We're occasionally the kidneys and the liver as well, because of what they've given us to support. But it's really part of this circle of a virtuous circle you're trying to create, this increased profitability, which is then able to be reinvested in the company. And the final positive impact, and not to be underestimated, is that every time we've moved a customer to an advanced service, we've seen a significant increase in customer satisfaction and loyalty. It's pretty obvious why, because advanced services, you're much more integrated into the customer operation, and you understand the customer better. They understand you better. You break down the barriers of mistrust that can sometimes occur between us and our customers. But that customer satisfaction is a priceless commodity that we've seen. All of our major advanced services grow substantially year on year because of that customer engagement, customer satisfaction. So it's much easier to just add more to the existing advanced services than go out to tender and go through a long process. So these have been really positive impacts. The negative impacts are equally damaging if you have a poor relationship with your customer because of the level of support you're providing. You lack intimacy with your customer. You don't understand how they operate your product. You don't understand if they operate your product. They bought it, but they're no longer buying spares or repairs from you. You've kind of lost complete touch with that customer, which makes the next round of product sales all the more difficult. The other risk when you lose sight of your customer and lose sight of services is this risk of disintermediation, or as it's more commonly known, the oh shit moment, when you suddenly find that there are competitors out there that have managed to get between you and your customer because you haven't been addressing your customer's concerns, and we see it more and more today, particularly with pure service players, with AI, with digital transformation. We see many new entrants into our markets looking at how they can take part of our business. And so if we're not moving upwards, moving into position, getting closer to our customers, developing our service offer, we stand a risk of losing that service revenue altogether. So I think that's been my experience over the years, but perhaps Paolo can give an equivalent view from Konecranes.
Thank you, Chris. Very interesting. Just before handing to Paolo, I just want to ask everyone to put their questions into the Q&A function as we go along, and there we would be able to answer them at the end of the webinar. I hand over to Paolo to share his experience at Konecranes. Please, Paolo.
Thank you, Ali, and thank you for having me, and good afternoon, good morning to everybody online. And I will share our experience, bringing maybe a bit more flavor to what Chris has been telling us already. And I will start from what Chris defined the product culture. So this was the very beginning of our journey towards a more servitized model. And the product culture, I guess, is what connects most of the industrial companies. It's very, very strong and difficult to overcome. Now, if we move to the next one, we also realized that we knew very little about our customers. And I call this the inside-out trap. You build the product, you deliver it, and you assume the job is done. And in this situation, normally revenues are transactional. You compete mainly on price. And what happened to the crane or the product in operation is not really visible. And the end result of this is that money are left on the table. So what we did in our case, when we also were in that situation, and we realized that there was a lot to discover about our customers, what you normally see, and this was also our case, we saw a proliferation, as an example, of customer dashboards. We exposed our customers to all kinds of cranes, functional data, cryptic fault alarms, difficult information to read, and customers did not really want nor need them. But of course, our engineering and technology ego was satisfied. Now, if we move to the next slide, then what you need to do is to flip the lens. So you need to start with what the customer is really trying to achieve. And from now on, maybe influenced by my Italian origin, I will utilize a restaurant and cooking analogy. So I hope you allow me this. So you need to start with this question, what is the customer really expecting? What is customer preference, and what do they really expect from you? And this is the outside in means that customer KPIs, uptime or moves per hour or operating cost, whatever, need to drive your product and service decisions. And this is a mindset shift that changes everything else downstream. It might sound obvious, but it's not. As we've heard, most of the manufacturers still design for their product specification, not for their operational outcome. So an example of how we started our journey, or our discovery journey in this case, with our customers, was to spend, among other things, a lot of time and resources in building our customer intelligence infrastructure. So we collected all asset data we had, we linked to customer data, and then connected those with revenues and any type of transaction that we were having with our customers, and then link this to a calculated service potential. So in this way, we were able to show the blue ocean. So we build a solid business case and a compelling story internally, and at the same time, we had a much better understanding of what our customers' needs were. Let's move to the next one. And then once you know what the customer is expecting from you, then you need to find the right ingredients and mix them in the right way to succeed and monetize your services. Normally, what I've seen is that ingredients are very similar for different industries. The recipe, though, might change. So you need to find what is the recipe that really stick to your customers. And I think one thing to remember is that this is a business model change, not a service department initiative, as we learned also from Chris. Engineering, commercial, operations, customer-facing teams, they all need to be involved and engaged. No one function can do this in isolation. So now talking about the recipe, if the data, the customer asset data, for me, is the critical ingredient, the secret sauce is the coalition. And it was also mentioned by Chris. This is really what makes the difference and what makes your recipe succeed. Let's go to the next one. Then what also is very critical is to find one willing or more willing customers that wants to build this with you. So basically, you need to build it with them, not just for them. And the methodology is simple. You identify a customer that is willing to co-design, build something together, and then iterate. And getting it wrong early is fine, is okay. The point here is to learn fast and hopefully faster than your competition. Because in this way, every iteration, every experience basically funds the next one. So you have better data, you have improved your offering, and hopefully you have also a stronger case internal. Now, and this reflecting on our own experience, one of the lessons we learned was that we were very early, probably the first one in our industry, in launching predictive maintenance services. We had a very solid business case. We were able to predict failures and so avoid downtime, which was one of the things that our customers care the most. We had the technology. We made sure that the processes were in place, but it didn't mean it worked. It took us few iterations with customers before we learned the recipe and before we were able to build a coalition around it and then scale it. Next one, please. The internal shift or the tipping point probably comes later than you expect, but I also believe that it comes faster than you think. You don't win internal belief just with a business case. Yeah, it really comes when the customer demand makes the argument for you. In our case, we spent even years of making the case internally with limited traction in Italy initially, and it only started to move when we got the first customer pool and when the revenue started moving. And this for us was the tipping point. Next. So, like I said, the revenue will follow, but you need to keep building until it does. So someone in the organization might have to hold the line through few years even before the numbers move, and you start the revenue spiral. And the mechanics are real, but it requires that someone in the leadership position stay the course before you can actually see the flywheel to turn. Next and last. And so to conclude, now the last phase, my recommendation is do not touch the organization before demand grows. Organizational changes should follow the servitized model, not the other way around. Here, from our experience, we originally did it the wrong way, or the way that didn't bring us anywhere. We changed the organization first, but the result didn't actually follow. So you need to gain the internal belief first, and this comes from the initial customer success stories, not from organizational changes. So to conclude, those in this room that are ready to start cooking, or they're still working on the ingredients, my recommendation is listen to your customers, craft your recipe, and take the first step. And buon appetito.
Thank you, Paolo. Really, really interesting. So it's the Q&A time. We've got good time that we can go through some of the questions. I think the two presentations are fantastic. While the questions are coming in, I would like to ask one question to Chris and then Paolo, if I may. I've been hearing you a lot, Chris, that you talk about this inertia, and my question is, if the benefits are so clear, like the increased sales of the product, profits, and customer loyalty, etc., why do you think that product culture and the inertia still win in many of the organizations? Is it because of the heritage, or is it because it's a comfort zone? Why do you think that still that product people wins in many of the organizations?
I think it's a combination of product culture, heritage. This is what got us to where we are. This is what defines our company, the quality of our products, the ability of our products to evolve to match the market need. But I think the other is bandwidth. People are very busy. They only can only concentrate on a number of things at once, and if they're in operational roles or firmly committed to developing products, it's difficult for them to find the room to change, to consider, to reflect on how they can support, how they can help. So I think you have to make it easy for them. You don't ask them to do everything. You ask them to be supportive, but you and to provide you the resources in order to make the transformation and change. But just getting time in senior executives' calendars to discuss and convince and cajole and influence is part of the challenge.
Absolutely. And Paolo, you talked about that we definitely need to develop these business models, value propositions, and then bring the organizations with you. I've seen many organizations get early interest in this, but very few truly scale. What do you think is the missing ingredients that the scale, we don't get to the scale by the time that's needed to? What's your experience of that?
Yeah, extremely good question. Scaling is definitely one of the most difficult phases of the whole servitization. So it requires, another set of skills here, and it probably needs even a bigger coalition than what it generated the initial traction. So the trap on the scaling, I think, is given by the fact that you assume that because a pilot was successful and that you've been able to achieve some results, then you assume that this is without much effort replicable in other places. But as you change customer, as you change geographies, as you change organization, obviously you will start facing all kind of additional challenges that you need to be aware of in advance, right? So to prevent, rejection, that what was successful in one place, all of a sudden it's not in another place, although you have done exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to be aware of the regional differences. You need to be aware of the competence level. So this is another, for me, extremely important element. The competence that are needed to deliver advanced services are not easy to replicate, and they might be in a different state in different parts of the organization. So be very much aware of the competence that exists in the organization and also that exist in the different geographies. So we have been using advanced services to, for instance, to really assess our competence level, because we realized that this was an essential element to scale advanced services.
Mm-hmm.
So moving from a pilot to scale.
And on that point, Paolo, there's a question from one of the audience that they want to get some tangible examples, which I can provide them with, but they've specifically asked within Konecranes, what's the example of advanced services that shifts from product to service? Can you provide us with a tangible example?
Shift from product to service. Well, for me, the first tangible example is when a company, an organization is able to sell, negotiate both together. So you don't approach the customer with equipment or products and then separately or even afterwards services, but you are able to approach the customer with a united solution. So this, again, is not necessarily an easy step to do for a product-centric organization or product culture. And then examples, for Konecranes, in our case, examples of advanced services is when our compensation, our remuneration is tied to outcome. So we are piloting, we are exploring, different type of outcome-based contracts, and those are when, like I said, our compensation is linked to specific outcome. Let it be moves per hours in our case, or uptime, but that's a clear indicator that you are moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There are more questions coming in. So probably for Chris and Paolo, would you be able to share some high-level percentage figure or change over time in terms of revenue profit achieved due to servitization over the years of your respective companies? Is there anything high level that you can share with us, Chris?
So our results are fairly in line with the survey that that we've increased probably in the last 8 years since I've been in this role. We've increased the percentage from 19% services to 26% services, which is as a percentage of service product mix. But in terms of profitability, we're at 26% of the revenues. We're at about 40% of the profit of the organization. So we we're incredibly relutive for the organization in what we've achieved, and that's grown considerably as our services become more mature and more advanced. We've definitely seen an increase in both in revenue and in margin.
Thank you. Do you have the same sort of numbers, Paolo, for Konecranes?
Actually, yes, our numbers can especially in our business area in Konecranes, which is Port Solutions, the numbers do match quite well with what Chris said. Perhaps one element I would add to this is that it will, like I mentioned before, it might take time, and you might even go through a period where you have a decline in your expected profitability. You know, you might even start jeopardizing your, let's say, basic services when you go into outcome based. Or this is how it might be perceived even within the organization, because now you are committing, you know, to outcomes, and therefore, you know, your perspective changes. You know, you are measured not on how many spare parts you sell, but how low spare parts you use, right? Because so the perspective changes, and the organization has to adapt to this. And it might be that in the short term, you might even have an impact, right? I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if others have the same experience. But in the long term, in medium long term, then you definitely see that the benefit and the positive impact, which is similar to what Chris said.
Absolutely. So another question for you, Paolo. It says that once you did start the change, the organization, did you start with the market channel and the deployments and delivery functions, or design and development of the services? So was it mostly about, if I remember correctly from your presentation, you talked first about the ingredients and the business model and the organizations rather than the organization change. So how the service has been developed first and then the organization, was it that the consequent or the sequence of what you followed?
Yes, definitely the organizational changes comes afterward. That's my recommendation. You might have little adaptations on the way, but you know, the real changes in the organization to suit advanced services, those should come as a consequence, not as a starting point. That's our learning, at least. And then where you start, my suggestion is to start from the backstage. You know, start with the product management, start with the capability, and then eventually you start involving the customer facing and the sales. So retraining, reskilling, this will come when the ingredients are there, when you have a solid back end.
Yeah, I'd reinforce that. So what we tended to do was focus on capture and design of a different service model. And then when we won it, we were in that, now we've got to deliver it. So that's the point at which the organization change became relevant, because changing the organization for something you haven't yet contracted is a huge risk, and you don't get many supporters. But once you've got a contract or a series of contracts, then you have relevance to organizational, or adapt your organization to deliver those.
And I guess that will come when you've co-created a service value propositions with the customers, and then you start piloting with the customers when you get some success, maybe before a new contract, Chris, or to get the organization buy-in, or just probably you need a business case after one or two pilots to go and invest a bit more. Is that the case?
For advanced services, I think they tend to be initially sort of one-offs. You've got an opportunity, you take the opportunity, and then you work out how you're going to deliver it. Once you've done several, then clearly you've got scale. You've got you're modifying your organization rather than changing it. So you're modifying the structure and the volume, to meet that model. But and I think what we found is that we've started in most of our markets with a one-off opportunity, and we've taken that opportunity, and then we said, okay, how can we now repeat that opportunity or that type of opportunity? Because as Paolo says, each customer is different, each culture is different, and sometimes you have to make quite significant modifications, but keeping to the same general or generic model is key.
Absolutely. And then one final question that we've got time. Paolo, we've got a question is, being in OEM, is it hard to deliver services to your customers when being dependent on different suppliers and components, like selling uptime, for example?
Absolutely, yes. And this is why the suppliers should be integral part of the journey. You wouldn't go too far in your servitization journey if your internal and external stakeholders are not on board. So my suggestion is that in your servitization ambitions, you include your at least key suppliers. And if they are not ready or willing, then maybe you have to consider even changing suppliers.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much.
At a point,
yeah,
tier one,
please.
No, the tier one thing is a key, has been a key for us, because we're rarely in the prime position in our markets. We usually sit behind aircraft primes or shipbuilding primes or others. But you can definitely build a coalition, and we've joint ventured with primes in order to deliver an advanced service, because they can rarely deliver them on their own when you're providing many of the components or the systems within their overall system. So that's been a key, is building joint ventures that benefit both parties when you're in a tier one position.
Absolutely. So very interesting. I think we can spend the whole day talking about some of these drivers and challenges, but that time is limited. Thank you for sharing the feedback and then your experience with us. On the screen, you can see that there are two QR codes, one for our latest book and the playbook, Servitization Strategy, which explains the what's and the why and the how in much more details, and the Servitization Playbook, where you can see the kind of like a hands-on tools that you can use to go about servitization. And on the right side is the big business case for servitization. It's the full narrative and full details about the survey, the companies, the key results, the methodology that we've followed. So you can have access to that. By all means, please check them out. There's some interesting results on that. And finally, if you are interested in a topic, if you feel that servitization is the right strategy, right business model for you, and you would like to know more and you'd like to find out more, please book conversation introductory discussions with our commercial director, Alistair Wallace, and then he will be able to help you to assess where you are in the journey, your current transformation stage, identify some of the immediate stall points, and some practical next steps. So please get in touch with him. The email address is at the bottom of the page, but you can get the full details on the website. Again, let's continue the conversation. It was great to have you with us. Again, I would like to thank our two great speakers, Chris Burrell and Paolo Dazzi, with their great experience in sharing with us. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Bye.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.